Okay, if we could get started. My talk is a little bit more practical than the last talk because what we have to look at if we're going to realistically explore, colonize, well, terraform and then colonize Mars is it's going to have to be a human endeavor. My idea came from my last book, Space and Ocean Exploration, the Alternative to the Military-Industrial Complex. And I wrote this book because I travel all over the world delivering wheelchairs to people as a result of war, accidents, and whatever. And I wanted to write a book that would be an economic alternative to the military-industrial complex. So that's what this talk is about. So how are we going to fund a project of the magnitude of the human exploration and eventual colonization of Mars? The only way you're going to do this, where it will make economic sense, is if you get the governments of the world all involved in doing it together. Mars is a little bit different than my Spanish and Portuguese ancestors exploring the world. When we land on Mars, we're not going to have nice waterfalls, salmon fishing, and beautiful natives in grass skirts wanting affection. That's not going to happen. So how are we going to do this in a manner that is going to be realistic? How many of you in this room are under age 40? Okay, here, put your hands out like that. Just put your hands out like that for just a second. Here, $20 trillion national debt, that's yours. Collapse of the fisheries, that's yours. Collapse of the aquifers, that's yours. A super viruses, that's yours. Overpopulation, that's yours. Nuclear proliferation, that's yours. Global climate change, that's yours. Now I want all of you to say, Danny, I would like to thank your generation for not blowing up the world. Come on, give me some love. Just, oh, you're so welcome. At least, okay, we didn't blow up the world. Now, we didn't do a good job with imperialism, and we didn't do a good job of managing the world, but we have the problems that we have. The only way that you're going to properly explore the inner solar system is if it's done in unison with all of the nations of the world working together. You need to transfer the technology from the first world to the equator so you get much easier launch loads and you can use the centrifugal force of the Earth to get into space easier. That will push technology down towards that middle belt so that you create high-tech jobs in places like Rwanda, the Congo, Brazil, which has a space program, India, which has a space program. Integrate all of those together. You cannot just cut defense spending. You know, you liberal lefty types have to get over it. It ain't going to happen. All 435 congressional districts have either a defense contractor and or a military installation. We have over 5,000 military installations worldwide in, let's see, over 80 countries. We rule the world, but we don't do a good job of ruling the world. So what are we going to do? Are we going to build another F-35 fighter plane that costs $35 million a copy? We're going to build another aircraft carrier battle group. We have 11 aircraft carrier battle groups. And you're taking a World War II technology that can be knocked out with a $1 million missile, a surface-to-surface missile, and it can knock out a $13 billion piece of hardware. And then if you look at all of the supporting hardware, that's about $22 billion. NASA's budget of $19 billion, their proposed budget, is 1/3 of what Americans spend on dog food. So this idea that we're going to do crowdfunding and we're all going to give up our Starbucks lattes and contribute to Mars is ridiculous. It's not going to happen. But what can happen is if you give the military-industrial complex a different mission, because they are going to get the money anyway. They have Congress wired right down to the last vote. And having worked in Washington, D.C., D.C. standing for Dog City because the place is vicious, An honest politician is a politician that whom, when bought, stays bought. So if you give them campaign contributions, they will vote for whatever you gave them for. That's why the pharmaceutical industry, the banking industry, the defense industry are the biggest lobbies out there. It should more appropriately be called the Military-Industrial Labor Union's University Complex instead of the Military-Industrial Complex, because everybody's got their hand in the defense pie. The real defense budget of the United States is over $1 trillion if you include the Department of Energy, which Rick Perry didn't realize. Their main job is to maintain our nuclear arsenal. Okay, if you include Veterans Affairs, the Department of Energy, and health and human-related costs, you're talking about some really, really serious money. Now, Mars is, on a good day, at least 33 million miles away. It takes 3 minutes for communications to go from here to Mars when it's close, and 21 minutes when it's far away. It's 71 degrees below zero, and to the best of our knowledge, there is no life on there whatsoever. Now, we don't fully know because we haven't explored the whole thing. Well, 95% of the ocean floor hasn't been explored, which doesn't surprise me. But I can tell you this, because I put together the Global High Seas Marine Preserve so that we could preserve the wildlife in the oceans. And our goal is to take 70% of the oceans and make them off limits to industrial commercial fishing so we can preserve the wildlife for you young people out there so your kids can have seafood and your children's children can have seafood. Half of the wildlife in the oceans is gone, 90% of the predator fish are gone, and the Asian nations are killing 230,000 sharks each day for shark fin soup. So if we redirect defense spending and give the aerospace contractors, the greedy little bitches that they are, exploration of the inner solar system, and give the Navy contractors preservation of the wildlife in the oceans, as well as harnessing the resources in the ocean carefully, not the wild, wild west where you have mine tailings all over, but carefully harnessing the resources in the ocean, we might just survive as a species. Because what's at play isn't the colonization of Mars. What is at play is, will the human species survive, or are we going to continue down this path where we're going to increase the defense budget by 10% under this administration, if I can call them an administration, and we're going to do what we know. We're going to do more defense spending. Why are we going to do more defense spending? We're going to do more defense spending because that's how the Congress has wired the money. And the only way it can change is if you give them an economic and political alternative that's viable. You can't just tell the people at Patterson Air Force Base, you can't just tell the people at McGill Air Force Base, Hill Air Force Base, you're fired, you're not going to have work. You have to give them an economic alternative. That's why space exploration is the logical alternative to defense spending for the aerospace contractors. If you can build a fighter plane, then you can build a plane that will go into lower Earth orbit or mine the asteroid belt. And it will create something that young people need. It will create millions of jobs, and the United States will be competing with brand new industries. In a capitalist model, industries constantly change and constantly not creationism, evolve. That's right. So the phones you have today are far different than the phones that we had when we were a kid that had a cord, and you had to wait for your turn to talk on the damn phone, because the phones today will take your picture, will do a video, will play music, and even have a calculator on there. You can even put Stargazer on there because those phones are so elaborate, because all of this has come through technological evolution. Now, we have a surplus of labor on the planet of at least 200 million people. You know, do you know how many people it takes to produce an automobile nowadays? 2, and lots of robots. We went from 50 people to 30 people to 2 people, and with some automakers, they might not even need 2. there are more people involved in auto sales than there are in the production of automobiles. Yes, we can produce the F-35 fighter plane, we can produce a B-2 bomber, we can produce space platform with lasers and all the rest, but that does not create the multiplier effect of jobs that's needed with brand new industries. If we give the aerospace contractors exploration of the inner solar system and work jointly with the Russians, the Chinese, the Brazilians, the Indians, the Pakistanis, the Iranians, yes, the Iranians, the North Koreans, where we all work together on space exploration, that project is so vast that that's the only possible way that we can fund it. This idea of we're going to do a Kickstarter campaign and raise $40 billion and we don't even have a 501c3 set up, that's ridiculous. I mean, let's look at it for what it is. It's not going to work. You got to go to your congressmen and your senators, and you got to tell your congressmen and your senators and the people that work in the defense industries in your congressional districts, and you've got to tell them, look, let's do something besides blowing up the Middle East. You know, I deliver wheelchairs all over the world, and I'll tell you, Al-Qaeda, George Bush, and the World Access Project have one thing in common. We all put people in wheelchairs. Now, it's not a good idea to put more people in wheelchairs. It's a rough life. I wouldn't recommend it for anybody, and it's not worth the parking spot. Iraq needs 4 million wheelchairs. You can thank Halliburton and Dick Cheney for that. Over 1 million people have died in Afghanistan and in Iraq. 29% of their population is now disabled. If you think war is this pretty thing, go to a veterans hospital and see somebody whose arms and legs have been blown off, because now with real-time medical care, your ability to get treated is right there. So you have about 30,000 Americans that have head wounds because of headshots. You need an economic alternative to the military-industrial complex, because if you don't, if you continue on this present path, yeah, you're going to have one hell of a Holocaust. You know, World War III will not be like World War II, because in World War III, there will be nuclear technology. Nuclear weapons are not weapons. They are instruments for committing genocide. Weapons originated when my Spanish and Roman ancestors fought with swords, and you looked a person in the eye before you stabbed him in the heart. Now, some asshole in Nellis Air Force Base can press a button and in a drone strike kill somebody in Yemen or in Afghanistan. 26,000 drone strikes took place during the Obama administration. He should give his Nobel Prize back. So if you want to explore Mars and the inner solar system, you're going to have to use the existing infrastructure that's there. The existing infrastructure, the technical pool is there, the scientists are there. It will create jobs not only in engineering and in aerospace, but also in agriculture, in botany, in virtually every field of science. We don't have a problem with the number of educated people. What we have is a problem with what are we going to do with overproduction and overcapacity. I mean, my gosh, if you throw a rock, you'll either hit an attorney or be sued by one. Oh, by the way, I'm an attorney. But, you know, how many more attorneys are we going to pump out? How many realtors are we going to pump out? How many more medical people are we going to pump out? What's needed are new industries. And if you don't compete with new industries, well, you're going after shrinking smaller and smaller market space. That's the problem with the American economy. That's why it's so stagnated. And that's why we have 3 primary industries: the military-industrial complex, the service industries. You know, the hookers I represent will not be outsourced. And the drug industry. The war on drugs, which now has incarcerated 2.4 million people and 16 million people on probation and parole. It's not working. You've got to change the social model from consumerism and materialism to sustainability. And if you go with what I'm proposing, and this book has 30 years of research in it, then what will happen is you'll demilitarize the economy, you'll create millions of new jobs, and at the end of the day, your great-grandchildren will look back and they'll go, geez, I sure got to thank Grandma for convincing the congressman to vote to increase the budget for space exploration and preservation of the wildlife in the oceans instead of for another Middle East war. Okay, questions?
There is a model to model this after with the Indian Space Agency, that they're the only space agency in the world that is not tied to the military, and that their primary goal is the expansion of their communication network for things like rural medicine and rural education, which I think is often ignored in these conversations.
Well, 1/4 of our scientists for NASA are from India, and they have an amazing technological pool, and we work with the Indian government and their space agency as well as the Russian space agency and all of these agencies, because this endeavor is so huge that no one nation can do it. We probably could have done it before we invaded Iraq, but that $3 trillion misadventure that killed over 1 million people and caused us huge spending, well, we can't do it anymore. You know, I got news for you guys. We're broke. We're $20 trillion in debt, and they're going to increase the budget deficit here shortly. Yeah, you're going to get a tremendous amount of innovation out of India, out of China, and out of these lesser powers, because they don't have the resources to bring to bear that some of these larger powers do.
Do you happen to know what the percentage of the U.S. federal budget goes to the military? Last I heard it was 16%.
Well, the budget has various components. You know, you have Health and Human Services, which is a huge chunk. And then you have the military-industrial complex, because whenever you're talking about defense spending, you have to include Veterans Affairs, and you have to include the Department of Energy, and you have to include the health and human services related costs of prior wars. If you do that, it's the largest budget item. It's over $1 trillion.
I mean, your talk was about a lot of things. It wasn't quite clear what the action items were.
I didn't take my Adderall for ADD, but go ahead.
No, I enjoyed it, but I wasn't clear what the action items would be. Would it be to write to Congress, or is it?
Either run for Congress or write your congressman and encourage them to redirect defense spending using the same defense contractors as space and ocean exploration. You can buy this book on Amazon, Space and Ocean Exploration, the Alternative to the Military-Industrial Complex. I use the proceeds, Bridget and I use the proceeds to deliver wheelchairs to other countries and to educate people on wildlife issues. Yes?
So kind of related question, and maybe your book covers this. Just wondering, for this kind of repurposing and redirecting, there's a question of the vision and the incentive of how, what's the moving force that's going to get it to happen.
The moving force that's going to get it to happen is you. You know, you can go through life and you can be a spectator, or you can go through life and be a participant. Now, if you get out there and get in the game and get involved, you're going to have an absolutely wonderful life. You're never going to get bored. But if you want to get bored, sit back, watch big men in tights try to break each other's knees, and drink some beer and eat some nachos. But if you get out there and get involved and you go to your congressman firsthand, make an appointment and visit them and tell them, we need to redirect defense spending towards space and ocean exploration. Look, if you think we got immigration problems now, wait until the fisheries collapse. The projections are that by 2048, all the wildlife in the oceans will be gone. 1 billion people depend on that protein to survive. And where the hell do you think they're going to go? They're going to go north. They're going to go anywhere where they can eat. You know, you don't have a choice at this point. You know, what, do we think that climate change isn't real and it's a Chinese conspiracy and a liberal joke? Well, unfortunately, it isn't. So you have to get involved. It's not a choice at this point. You live in a time frame in history where your participation in society is required, because unlike a lot of other people, you guys know this stuff. You guys understand every single thing that we're talking about. You understand just how dangerous it really is. This isn't as dangerous as it was when I was growing up. Hell, when I was growing up, we were worried about whether or not we were going to blow up the damn world. I drafted the legislation that stopped the MX weapon system from being built, and I did the nerve gas case against the U.S. Army, and I forced them to clean up all the Indian reservations nationally from formerly used defense sites. Yeah, they had a little whoops, which killed about 6,000 sheep with nerve agent VX. And they've had lots of whoopses. I mean, it's only through the sheer grace of God that we have not had a nuclear weapon go off. I mean, I was certain we would have one go off by now. But we can't keep playing in this direction. We can't keep going down this path. We're either going to redirect defense spending, or we're going to blow up the world, or we're going to destroy the ecology. I mean, that's basically what our choices are. Questions? Yes? You're not going to get the banking community to back the idea of a trip to Mars, because Mars is minus 70 degrees cold. It's 33 to 35 million miles away. There's not a return on investment. If you're a company, a public company, when you invest, you want a return on the money. There's no way in hell Wall Street's going to fund an adventure going to Mars. You know, it's going to have to be done through the public sector, just like the moon launch was done through the public sector. What, do you think we could have got Wall Street in 1961 to fund Kennedy's initiative? It wasn't going to happen. It happened with taxpayers' money. And that's how this is going to happen. Now, what will happen is if we redirect defense spending and we first explore Mars, and I would recommend we just do it with robots, because this idea of having Elon Musk going over there in a nice suit and a tie, along with Jeff Bezos and Richard Branson, and they're going to be planting a flag on Mars, that's really, really dangerous. I think the best way to do it is do it with robots first, get all the infrastructure set up, and then send people over there. And over time, after we have enough colonies there, and we start terraforming, which is going to be extremely difficult, then it will work. Now, when people say, well, you can't terraform, it's impossible to have terraforming work. Bullshit. You have 5 million people that live in Chicago and it's colder than hell. That's called terraforming. Look at Las Vegas. It's 110 degrees. Of course you can have terraforming. You adjust the environment to make it sustainable for human life. But I don't want it for just human life. I want it for all life. See, I think Copernicus was wrong. I think that the Earth is the center of the universe, because I'll tell you what, it's 4.2 light years to Proxima Centauri. This is it. This is where life exists. And bluefin tuna is on the very edge of extinction. You look at those predators that are out there in the oceans, and they're all being killed off, 90% have been killed off. Your defense dollars could go to have the Navy protect the wildlife in the oceans. Question? Oh, I've talked long enough. I want to hear from you guys. So, yeah, will it work? Of course it'll work. Is it hopeless? No, it's not hopeless. I mean, my gosh, we're only into this thing 200 years. 200 years ago, there was 1 billion people. Then we went to 2 billion in 1900, to 4 billion in 1970. Today, we're at 7.56 billion and counting. And between the Mormons and the Muslims and the Catholics, I think we'll probably make it to 9 billion, because Lord knows every sperm is sacred, and you forget about the life that's here. You really have to go and produce and reproduce and reproduce. But what we have to do, whether we like it or not, is we have got to protect the wildlife that's on this planet, and we have to do it right now. Yeah, we can terraform Mars. So what will happen is, in the initial stage, you'll explore it. Then after you explore it, then you'll have the terraforming part. Then you'll colonize it. Look where we are now from 500 years ago. I mean, 500 years ago, it took Magellan 5 years to make it around the planet. He didn't make it all the way. He died in the Philippines because he decided to get nice and happy in a conflict that wasn't his. Of his 240 men, 18 made it back. When I flew around the world the first time, it was like, wow, this is incredible. I mean, my son and daughter-in-law are going to be in Australia tomorrow. We're 22 hours away from any city on the planet. We don't have to like each other, and we probably never will. But like each other or not, we have to work together. The days where we can have a fire in one part of this spaceship and it's not going to affect people on the rest of the spaceship are over. You know, we live on one planet, on one ecosystem. What happens in Brazil affects us here. What happens in the Sudan affects us here. And yeah, we live in the top 4%, but we're not the 4%. If you get up in the morning and you take a hot shower, you're in the top 1% in the world. So if you all work together and you all contact your congressmen and your senators and you tell them, look, you got to go with this idea. You got to go with something that's going to work. Because if you go on the current path that these guys, and you're going to get a lot of propaganda from the big six media companies before they initiate their next conflict. But don't buy the propaganda. Don't believe the bullshit. You know, change it. Thank you.